What happens when cinema dares to scare a little too much? In the 1960s, a wave of horror movies invaded theaters and drive-ins, turning safe nights out into genuine fever dreams. Directors pushed every limit they could find, and censors panicked. Some films were heavily cut, others banned in entire countries, and the few changed the rules of what horror could do on screen forever. Tonight, we uncover 12 controversial horrors from the 60s that went way too far for their time. Stay close. Some of these nightmares were barely allowed to exist. Number 12. Village of the Damned, 1960. Village of the Damned came from the quiet British countryside and hit audiences like a cold shock. Based on John Wyndham's novel The Midwich Cuckoos, the film begins when every woman of childbearing age in a small village suddenly falls unconscious at the same moment. Weeks later, they all wake up pregnant, with no explanation. 9 months pass, and they give birth to eerily identical blonde children with piercing eyes that glow when they use their powers. These children can read minds, force people to harm themselves, and kill with a single thought. What made it so disturbing was the complete subversion of innocence. Children, usually symbols of purity, become emotionless, calculating invaders. The film never shows graphic violence, but the psychological terror is relentless. A man forced to shoot himself, a woman walking into fire, all because a child simply looks at them. Audiences in 1960 were not prepared for that level of mind control and implied alien violation of the human body. Theaters reported parents covering their children's eyes and some walkouts during the schoolhouse climax. Director Wolf Rilla shot the film on a modest budget, but he used every trick to amplify unease. Stark black and white photography, long static shots, minimal music, and those glowing eyes achieved with simple contact lenses and clever lighting. The children were played by real kids, but their synchronized, emotionless performances were rehearsed for hours to feel unnatural. Test screenings caused genuine distress. People said the film made them afraid of their own children for days. Censors in some countries demanded cuts to the suicide scenes, but the film's power lies in what it implies rather than shows. Over the decades, Village of the Damned became a cornerstone of evil child horror, directly influencing The Omen, The Brood, and even Children of the Corn. Yet in 1960, it felt like a violation of natural order. Its message still chills. Innocence can be the most terrifying disguise. And once you've seen those glowing eyes, no quiet village ever feels safe again. Number 11. Carnival of Souls, 1962. Carnival of Souls was made for almost nothing. A true independent film shot in Kansas and Utah on a budget of about $30,000. Yet it created one of the most haunting atmospheres in all of 60s horror. The story follows Mary Henry, a church organist who survives a terrible car accident that kills her friends. Afterward, she begins seeing pale, grinning figures everywhere, in windows, in mirrors, on the street. She is drawn to an abandoned carnival pavilion by a lake, where the ghouls seem to wait for her. The film feels like a waking nightmare. There is almost no dialogue in long stretches. Instead, we get relentless organ music, echoing footsteps, and sudden silences that make your skin crawl. Director Herc Harvey, who also plays the main ghoul, used real locations, the decaying Salt Hair Pavilion, and non-professional actors to give everything a raw, documentary-like quality. The black and white cinematography turns ordinary spaces into something sinister. A hotel corridor becomes endless. A bus window reflects deathly faces. Audiences at drive-ins and grindhouses were shaken. Many complained they couldn't sleep, that the ghouls appeared in their rearview mirrors on the way home. Parents wrote angry letters about the film's bleakness and lack of explanation. Critics called it amateurish or pretentious, but its dream logic structure and refusal to explain anything made it feel deeply personal and invasive. Censors didn't cut much, they simply didn't know what to make of it. The ending, one scene, is impossible to forget. Carnival of Souls was largely ignored in its day, but it later became a cult classic. David Lynch, George A. Romero, and countless music videos drew from its surreal dread. In 1962, it felt too strange, too hopeless, too psychologically naked for mainstream horror. Its core idea remains powerful. Sometimes the dead don't haunt you. You haunt yourself, and that empty pavilion by the lake still waits. Number 10. The Birds, 1963. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds took the everyday and made it monstrous. Melanie Daniels, a carefree San Francisco socialite, travels to a small coastal town to play a practical joke on a man she met. But shortly after she arrives, birds begin attacking, first in small numbers, then in waves. Seagulls crash into windows, crows fill the sky, sparrows swarm down chimneys. No explanation is ever given. The film broke every rule of monster movies. There is no mad scientist, no ancient curse, just nature suddenly turning hostile. The attacks are graphic for 1963. Eyes pecked out, children bloodied, a man set on fire by birds. The famous schoolhouse sequence where crows silently gather then attack children running down a hill caused genuine panic in theaters. Some viewers fainted, others left screaming. Parents wrote to Hitchcock personally, accusing him of traumatizing their kids. Behind the scenes was chaos. Hitchcock used a combination of trained birds, mechanical models, and optical effects. Actress Tippi Hedren was subjected to days of real birds being thrown at her. She later said it was borderline torture. The sound design, a mix of real bird calls and electronic shrieks created by composer Bernard Herrmann, amplified the terror. Censors debated cutting the children's attack and the final shot of hundreds of birds waiting. Test audiences were so disturbed that Hitchcock added extra reassurance in the final edit. The Birds became a landmark for Nature Strikes Back horror and directly influenced Jaws, The Happening, and many eco-horror films that followed. In 1963, it felt like a betrayal. Even the sky could turn against you. And once you've seen those birds gather silently on power lines, no quiet morning feels peaceful again. Number 9. Black Sunday, 1960. Black Sunday, La Mascara del Demonio, marked the explosive arrival of Italian horror and pushed gore and atmosphere further than most 60s films dared. Directed by Mario Bava, it tells of a 17th century witch and her lover who are executed with a spiked mask nailed to their faces. 2 centuries later, the witch's descendant is possessed, and the mask returns to claim new victims. The opening execution scene, the mask being hammered onto the witch's face, was so brutal that many countries banned or heavily cut the film. In the UK, it was not released until 1968, and even then in a heavily censored version. US distributors trimmed several minutes of violence and changed the title to Revenge of the Vampire. Audiences were stunned by the graphic imagery, melting wax faces, dripping blood, decaying bodies rising from graves. Baba shot in stark black and white, using fog, cobwebs, and candlelight to create a suffocating Gothic atmosphere. The castle sets were real ruins, adding authenticity. Barbara Steele, in a dual role as the witch and her descendant, became an instant horror icon with her haunting beauty and tormented expressions. The film's eroticism mixed with sadism made censors especially nervous. It felt too adult for the time. Despite, or because of, the bans, Black Sunday became hugely influential. Tim Burton, Dario Argento, and even heavy metal album covers drew from its imagery. In 1960, it was too violent, too sensual, too morbid for mainstream horror. Its message remains: vengeance from beyond the grave is patient, cruel, and inevitable. And that spiked mask is still one of the most terrifying props in horror history. Number 8. The Haunting, 1963. The Haunting remains one of the purest examples of psychological horror ever made, and in 1963, it terrified audiences precisely because it showed almost nothing. Directed by Robert Wise and based on Shirley Jackson's novel The Haunting of Hill House, the film follows a group of 4 people who spend a few nights in the notoriously haunted Belasco house to investigate paranormal activity. There is Dr. Markway, the scientist, Theodora, the psychic, Luke, the heir, and Eleanor, the fragile, lonely woman who has spent her life caring for her dying mother. From the first night, strange things happen. Heavy breathing behind doors, pounding on walls, cold spots, a child's laughter in the dark, and, most memorably, a pair of invisible hands that grasp Eleanor's in the middle of the night. The house itself seems alive, breathing, watching, hating. Wise deliberately never shows a single ghost. Instead, he relies on sound design, creaking wood, slamming doors, distant crying, clever camera angles, and the actors' terrified reactions to create dread. The famous hand scene, where Eleanor feels cold fingers interlacing with hers, caused genuine screams in theaters. Many viewers later said they felt watched even after leaving the cinema. Censors were uncomfortable with the implied lesbian subtext between Eleanor and Theodora, and some countries cut dialogue or entire scenes. Test audiences reported nightmares and demanded to know what really happened. Actress Julie Harris, who played Eleanor, was so immersed in the role that she suffered emotional breakdowns during filming. Wise kept her isolated from the cast to heighten her vulnerability. The house was shot at Eddington Park in England, and the production used forced perspective and lighting to make rooms feel impossibly large and oppressive. The Haunting was critically praised but commercially modest. Audiences wanted visible monsters, not suggestion. Yet it became the gold standard for haunted house films, influencing The Conjuring, The Others, The Innocents, and countless others. In 1963, it went too far by trusting the viewer's imagination more than any special effect. Its central truth endures. Sometimes the scariest thing is what you cannot see. And once you've heard that house breathe, no old building ever feels empty again. Number 7. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane turned Hollywood glamour into grotesque nightmare fuel. Directed by Robert Aldridge, it stars Bette Davis as Jane Hudson, a former child vaudeville star who now lives in a decaying Hollywood mansion with her wheelchair-bound sister Blanche, Joan Crawford, a once successful film actress. Jane, mentally unstable and alcoholic, torments Blanche with psychological cruelty, serving her a dead rat on a platter, locking her in her room, and reenacting her childhood routines in full makeup. The film is a slow descent into madness, filled with moments that were shocking for 1962. Jane beating Blanche with a cane, forcing her to eat from a tray like a dog, and the infamous, "You mean all this time we could have been friends?" line delivered with chilling innocence. Audiences laughed nervously at first, then fell silent as the cruelty escalated. Theaters saw walkouts during the rat scene, and some viewers reported feeling physically ill. Parents and critics accused the film of exploiting aging actresses and showing too much sadism toward the disabled. Behind the scenes, the real-life feud between Davis and Crawford was legendary. Crawford was allegedly injured during the cane scene, and Davis wore heavy makeup to look older and more grotesque. Aldrich shot in harsh, unflattering light to emphasize decay, and the claustrophobic mansion sets made every room feel like a prison. Studios worried about backlash from older fans and religious groups over the film's bleakness and implied violence. Despite controversy, it became a box office hit and launched the psycho-biddy or hagsploitation subgenre, influencing films like Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte and Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice. In 1962, it went too far by showing the dark side of faded fame and sibling rivalry without redemption. Its core idea lingers. Stardom can curdle into something monstrous, and that wheelchair in the hallway still feels like a threat. Number 6. Eyes Without a Face, Les Yeux Sans Visage, 1960. Eyes Without a Face is French horror at its most clinical and poetic, and in 1960 it was almost too disturbing to watch. Directed by Georges Franju, the story follows Dr. Genesier, a brilliant surgeon whose daughter Christiane was horribly disfigured in a car accident. Obsessed with restoring her beauty, he kidnaps young women, drugs them, removes their faces in graphic detail, and attempts to graft the skin onto his daughter. Christiane, hidden behind a white porcelain mask, lives in isolation, haunted by guilt and the faces of the dead. The central surgery sequence, shown in unflinching detail, caused fainting spells and vomiting in theaters across Europe. In the UK, the film was banned until 1969. In the US, it was heavily cut and retitled The Horror Chamber of Dr. Faustus. Audiences were not prepared for such realism in horror. Real surgical instruments, slow incisions, blood pooling on the table. Censors called it sadistic and pornographic. Franju defended it as a tragedy about beauty and loss, but the graphic nature made it feel like a violation. Franju shot in cold, sterile whites and grays, using a real clinic for authenticity. The mask worn by Edith Scobe became iconic, innocent yet terrifying. The film's tone mixes clinical detachment with deep melancholy, making the horror feel both scientific and deeply human. Behind the scenes, actors were emotionally drained by the subject matter. Franju himself said the film was about the price of perfection. Eyes Without a Face went on to influence everything from Face Off to modern body horror like Martyrs and Raw. In 1960, it went too far by treating beauty as a literal commodity and showing surgery without flinching. Its haunting truth remains: the quest to fix the broken can destroy more than it saves. And that white mask still looks like death wearing innocence. Number 5. Repulsion, 1965. Repulsion was Roman Polanski's first English-language film and one of the most psychologically brutal depictions of mental breakdown ever put on screen. Catherine Deneuve plays Carole Ledoux, a shy Belgian manicurist living in London with her sister. When her sister goes on holiday, Carole is left alone, and her isolation spirals into hallucinations. Hands reaching out of walls, rapists in the dark, cracks splitting the apartment, decaying corpses on the bed. The film is unrelenting. Long, silent stretches, distorted sound effects, creaking floors, dripping faucets, sudden screams, and subjective camera work make the viewer feel trapped inside Carole's mind. The infamous hand scene, where walls sprout grasping hands, caused audiences to flinch and scream. The implied rape scenes and the final corpse discovery were so raw that censors in several countries demanded cuts. Conservative theaters refused to screen it at all. Polanski shot in a real London apartment, keeping the space cramped to heighten claustrophobia. Deneuve prepared by isolating herself for weeks, refusing contact with the crew. The film's eroticism, Carole's beauty contrasted with her terror, made some critics accuse it of misogyny, while others praised its empathy for mental illness. Test screenings left viewers shaken. Some walked out unable to finish. Repulsion became a landmark of psychological horror, influencing Black Swan, Hereditary, and countless films about madness. In 1965, it went too far by showing a woman's descent into psychosis without explanation or comfort. Its core idea endures: loneliness can breed monsters inside your own head, and those hands from the wall still reach out in the dark. Number 4. Peeping Tom, 1960. Peeping Tom is perhaps the most notorious British horror film of the 1960s, and it destroyed director Michael Powell's career. The story follows Mark Lewis, a quiet film technician who murders women while filming their terror with a camera rigged with a spike. He's obsessed with capturing the perfect moment of fear, and the audience is implicated because we watch through his lens. The film's use of POV, point of view, killing was revolutionary and deeply uncomfortable. Viewers felt complicit in the murders, which outraged critics. The UK press called it sick, perverted, and the filthiest film I remember seeing at the cinema. Theaters faced protests, and many refused to show it. Censors cut scenes, but the damage was done. Powell was effectively blacklisted. Powell used his own camera equipment and real locations to create a documentary-like realism. The victim's screams were recorded live, and the spike mechanism was practical. The film's exploration of voyeurism and cinema itself made it feel like a mirror held up to the audience. Behind the scenes, Powell insisted on authenticity, even at the cost of his reputation. Peeping Tom was reviled in 1960, but later championed by Martin Scorsese and others as a masterpiece. It predated and influenced slasher films, found footage horror, and movies like Blow Up and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In its time, it went too far by accusing the viewer of enjoying violence. Its truth still stings. Watching can be a form of killing, and that camera lens never feels innocent again. Number 3. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead changed horror forever, and in 1968, it shocked audiences with its graphic cannibalism and bleakness. The film begins with siblings visiting their father's grave when the dead begin to rise and eat the living. A small group barricades themselves in a farmhouse, but tensions, racism, and stupidity lead to disaster. The gore was unprecedented. Flesh torn from arms, entrails pulled out, a child eating her parents. Drive-in audiences screamed, vomited, and walked out. Critics called it sickening and exploitative. Some theaters added warnings or refused to screen it. Censors in several countries banned it outright. The black protagonist, Dwayne Jones, dying at the hands of white vigilantes, added social commentary that made the film even more uncomfortable. Romero shot on a $114,000 budget, using friends and locals. Chocolate syrup stood in for blood, but the practical effects looked disturbingly real. The film was shot in black and white to save money, but the stark contrast amplified the horror. Behind the scenes, the cast was exhausted from night shoots in a real farmhouse. Night of the Living Dead birthed the modern zombie genre and influenced everything from Dawn of the Dead to The Walking Dead. In 1968, it went too far by showing graphic cannibalism, no heroes, and no hope. Its core truth endures. Society collapses faster than the dead rise, and that farmhouse door still feels too thin. Number 2. Rosemary's Baby, 1968. Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby brought satanic panic into upscale Manhattan apartments, and it terrified audiences on a deeply personal level. Mia Farrow plays Rosemary Woodhouse, a young wife who moves into the Bramford building with her actor husband Guy. Soon she suspects her neighbors are part of a coven that wants her baby for Satan. The film is slow, insidious, and suffocating. The famous dream sequence, Rosemary raped by a demonic figure while her neighbors watch, was shocking in 1968, with full nudity and implied blasphemy. Churches protested, theaters faced pickets, and some cities threatened bans. Censors cut the nudity in Dream, but the implication remained. Parents accused Polanski of traumatizing women. Polanski shot in real New York locations, using natural light and long takes to make the apartment feel lived in and inescapable. Farrow's real pregnancy added authenticity. She lost weight dramatically during filming. The score by Christoph Kometa is gentle lullabies that turn sinister. Behind the scenes, Polanski insisted on realism. Even the famous Hail Satan chant was rehearsed for authenticity. Rosemary's Baby defined satanic horror and influenced The Omen, The Exorcist, and countless occult thrillers. In 1968, it went too far by suggesting evil could hide in polite society, in your own home. Its warning lingers. Trust no one, especially when they smile. And that baby carriage still rocks in the dark. Number 1. Psycho, 1960. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho redefined horror with one shower scene, and it changed cinema forever. The story follows Marion Crane, who steals $40,000 and hides at the Bates Motel, run by shy Norman Bates and his domineering mother. The infamous shower murder, 45 seconds, 78 camera setups, chocolate syrup for blood, shocked audiences into screams and fainting. Theaters installed nurses, added no late admittance policies, and saw mass walkouts. Critics were divided. Some called it disgusting, others brilliant. Censors demanded cuts to nudity, blood, and the toilet flush, the first ever in American film. Hitchcock insisted on showing the body being wrapped, making the violence feel real. The twist ending was kept secret. Theaters refused entry after the film started. Hitchcock shot in the black and white to save money and make it feel like a TV episode. But the quick cuts and Bernard Herrmann's screeching strings amplified terror. Janet Leigh couldn't take showers for years afterward. The film's success saved Paramount and proved horror could be mainstream. Psycho birthed the slasher genre, influenced everything from Halloween to Scream. In 1960, it went too far by killing the star early, showing graphic violence, and implicating the audience in voyeurism. Its final truth closes the decade. We all go a little mad sometimes, and that shower curtain still hides something. From evil children to Walking Dead, from surgical masks to devil babies, the 60s turned horror into a mirror of society's deepest fears. Each film pushed boundaries and paid the price, but they also paved the way for everything we fear today. Which of these lost horrors still haunts you? Like, subscribe, and share your favorite nightmare below. That's all for tonight. 12 horror films from the 1960s that crossed lines most people weren't ready to see crossed. They didn't just scare, they unsettled, provoked, and in some cases, changed what horror could be. From glowing-eyed children to knives in the shower, from surgical masks to the dead rising, these movies held up a mirror to the decade's deepest anxieties and refused to look away. If any of these still haunt your dreams, or if one of them made you turn off the lights differently, drop it in the comments. Which nightmare from the 60s refuses to leave you alone? I read every one. If you enjoy these deep dives into the darker corners of classic cinema, hit subscribe and the bell. There are plenty more forgotten horrors waiting. Thanks for watching with me. Sleep tight, if you can. See you in the next one.